I had just become the head of the world's #1 assassin organization when a system informed me I'd been transported into the world of a trashy romance novel. My childhood sweetheart abandoned me at my own birthday party, all to comfort the male lead who was bummed about his career. The most infuriating part was that the damn system demanded I swallow my pride, warning that the male lead would otherwise publicly humiliate me on the spot. I let out a cold laugh and muted the system directly. Why would a destined supervillain need to listen to some trashy romance novel system drone on? A betrayal from my childhood sweetheart? By the next day, her family would be ruined. Fake heirs, first loves, stand-ins, they could all go to hell for all I cared. At that moment, inside New York City's largest nightclub, the DJ held a microphone and shouted, "Tonight, everything's on Mr. Walton. Let's wish Mr. Walton a happy birthday." Cheers instantly erupted, shaking the rafters. In a private room on the second floor, I sat on a sofa, holding a glass of whiskey. My eyes narrowed as I gazed out the window. Beside me, my good friend Liam Black was smoking, and after a glance at his watch, he couldn't help but frown. "What's going on? Weren't the Miller sisters supposed to be handling everything tonight?" Liam asked. "They said they were throwing this birthday party especially for you, but it's getting late." "Where are they?" The Miller sisters Liam mentioned, Sophia and Isabella, were my childhood friends. We grew up together, and they even used to bicker jealously over which one of them would marry me. The sisters had booked this birthday party months in advance, but now that the day was here, they had decided to pull a disappearing act, which really pissed me off. I don't like being stood up. Liam stubbed out his cigarette and habitually started scrolling through his Facebook feed. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he nearly dropped his phone in shock. "What is it?" I asked, leaning back on the sofa and fixing my gaze on him. Under my stare, Liam grew flustered, cracking a strained smile. "Well, you should probably see for yourself." With that, he sighed softly and handed me his phone. At the top of the feed was a post from Sophia Miller with a beach in the background, the location tagged as some island abroad. On the beach at night, 3 people were holding hands, gathered around a bonfire. It was Sophia, Isabella, and a guy named Julian Vance. The smiles on their faces were radiant, and the caption read, "Our poor little bro couldn't find a job after graduation, so we're taking him out to clear his head. Hope you're always happy, Julian." They even added a smiley face emoji. I had just checked my own Facebook feed, but this post wasn't there. Clearly, the 2 of them had blocked me. Liam took the phone back, indignantly dialing Sophia's number. The phone rang for a long time with no answer. Not giving up, Liam called twice more, and just as the call was about to go to voicemail, someone finally picked up. The wind was howling on the other end, mixed with the sound of crashing waves. "Sophia, what the hell are you 2 doing?" Liam demanded, his tone accusatory from the start. On the other end, Sophia's brow furrowed, her voice tinged with annoyance. "Liam, are you questioning me?" Liam fought to control his anger. "Do you have any idea what day it is?" Hearing Liam's words, the voice on the other end faltered. I gestured to Liam with a flicker of interest, and understanding my meaning, he handed me the phone. I spoke calmly into it. "It's me." The next moment, the voice on the other end sounded flustered. "Ethan, my sister and I had an emergency, so we couldn't make it to your birthday party today. Your so-called emergency is taking a scholarship kid on a date overseas?" I cut her off. Hearing the word date, Sophia frowned. "How could you think that?" Just then, another female voice came through the receiver. "Yeah, Julian's been an orphan his whole life and doesn't know many people. He just graduated and is having a tough time finding a job. He's all alone and miserable, so my sister and I just brought him out to cheer him up. Ethan, can't you be a little less petty?" That was the voice of Sophia's younger sister, Isabella. Then, a voice dripping with false sincerity came through the phone. "Sophia, Isabella, is Ethan upset because of me? Maybe you 2 should go back. I'll be perfectly fine on my own." Sophia quickly reassured him. "How could we possibly leave you here all by yourself?" Then, Sophia's voice, now laced with a distinct chill, was directed at me. "Can you stop being so unreasonable? It's just a birthday. We can celebrate it with you when we get back. What's the big deal?" I cleaned out my ear, finding the whole thing rather amusing. It seemed I had been far too lenient with them. "Sophia, you must have a death wish. Who gave you the nerve to speak to me like that?" Seemingly sensing the displeasure in my tone, Sophia opened her mouth to explain, but I had already hung up. I had no time for useless excuses. Some actions, once taken, cannot be undone. The Miller family would pay the price for the actions of these 2 sisters. My family, the Waltons, was the wealthiest in New York City, with influence extending beyond business into powerful political circles, dominating both legitimate and illicit worlds with immense power. After I took over the family enterprises upon coming of age, our power reached even greater heights. In contrast, the Miller family, home to Sophia and Isabella, was merely an ordinary wealthy family, not even qualifying as true old money. In the eyes of genuine heirs from established dynasties, they were nothing more than new money upstarts who got lucky on a market trend. The connection between our families began in childhood when I lived with my grandmother in a villa in the Hamptons, and the Millers were our neighbors. Because the children got along well, our families developed a friendly relationship. My grandmother was particularly fond of the two girls and even mentioned that I should marry one of them someday. Over the years, because of my connection to them, the elite families of New York City had always shown them a degree of respect. It now appeared this had caused them to lose touch with reality. To be honest, a birthday party itself meant nothing, and I had no real feelings for either of them. I couldn't care less if they came or not. But they were the ones who insisted on throwing the party, only to ditch it on the day of to travel abroad with some manipulative pretty boy. Everyone in our circle knew the Miller sisters were my girls. This wasn't just about being stood up. It was about the Miller sisters trampling the Walton family's reputation into the dirt. Did they really think I was a pushover? Since they didn't know their place, then the Miller family's time was up. I tossed the phone back to Liam, my expression indifferent as I spoke casually. Forget about it. If they're looking for a death sentence, I'm more than happy to grant it. Liam knew that from this day forward, there would be no place left for the Millers in this country. A family that could only throw its weight around because of the Waltons' backing had failed to understand who was in charge and dared to disrespect me. Whatever came next, they had brought it upon themselves. You're damn right, the Miller sisters' blindness is their loss. Good thing I came prepared today, Liam said with a laugh, then clapped his hands. Instantly, the closed doors swung open, and a line of more than a dozen famous actresses, models, and other starlets filed into the room. Liam leaned back on the sofa and gestured towards me. Today is Mr. Walton's birthday. If you keep him company and show him a good time, you'll be rewarded handsomely. At his words, the girls' eyes lit up, and their gazes on me softened, becoming sultry and inviting. The women swarmed me, and I didn't refuse, wrapping an arm around one on each side and enjoying their attention as they fed me drinks and snacks. The private room instantly became a lively scene. But just then, a notification sound suddenly echoed in my mind. Host has been detected experiencing an angsty romance plot. Happiness system binding successful. My expression froze. After 20 years in this world, I was finally hearing the word system. However, to me, a system was no different from trash. After I arrived in this world, it was as if I had awakened a god-tier comprehension buff, and my luck was absurdly strong. Whatever I wanted to learn, I could master and effortlessly rise to the top. Whatever I set out to do, I would inevitably succeed, as if fate itself was clearing a path for me. As a child, I suspected I might have been given the template for a power fantasy protagonist, because my life had been nothing but smooth sailing. Now, I had finally encountered a minor setback, though the incident with the Miller sisters hardly qualified as a setback. At most, it was just a disgusting annoyance. I didn't care about them. I'd been surrounded by countless women my entire life. System, what do you do? I asked in my mind. A mechanical reply quickly sounded in my head. Ding. This is the happiness system. As the name implies, its purpose is to reverse the misfortunes of this world. As long as the host helps the protagonist reverse their tragedy and achieve a happy life, you will receive monetary rewards from the system, helping you accumulate over 100 million in assets in a short time and reach the pinnacle of life. 100 million? What a vicious system. Was it trying to bankrupt the Walton family? Detecting that the host is currently experiencing the angsty romance plot, the childhood sweetheart loses to the newcomer. A mission is hereby issued. Option 1. The host will immediately go abroad to the resort island and propose to the Miller sisters in a grand gesture. Move them with your sincerity. Make them understand that you are the one who loves them most, and ultimately find happiness. Note, this has a chance of backfiring and causing disgust. Mission reward, $10 million in cash. Option 2. The host will completely cut off contact with the Miller sisters starting today. Within the next month, quietly leave the country to play hard to get, thereby forcing the Miller sisters to realize their true feelings and stage a dramatic win-him-back scenario. Note, this option is guaranteed to succeed. The Miller sisters are deeply in love with the host and only need a catalyst to realize it. Upon completion, this option rewards $50 million in cash and a 3-bedroom apartment in a New York suburb. Please make your choice, host, and walk towards a happy life. After reading this series of options, I felt my vision go dark, my mind filled with a single, profound question. What the hell is wrong with this damn system? What kind of bizarre options were these? One was to be a simp and the other was to be a simp who plays hard to get. Was it implying that I couldn't be happy without the Miller sisters? And who the hell were the Miller sisters anyway? Were they even worthy? I was floored. I never imagined there could be such disgusting options. Was this system brain dead? Even more ridiculous were the rewards. 10 million, 50 million, and a suburban 3-bedroom apartment. The Walton family's dogs would turn their noses up at that paltry sum. Host, please do not doubt the professionalism of this system. The person it binds to cannot be a mistake. Please make your choice as soon as possible. Meanwhile, on the resort island, watching Sophia hang up the phone with a look of indignation, Isabella couldn't help but ask, "Sis, what did Ethan say?" Sophia's expression was grim. "Ethan seems angry. His tone wasn't very good just now. We were just taking Julian out to cheer him up. What's the big deal?" Isabella said, annoyed. "That's right, we're not his accessories. Are we supposed to do nothing but revolve around him?" Sophia shook her head and took a deep breath. "We're out of the country, and not only is Ethan not concerned about our safety, he's making a huge deal out of something so trivial. I'm going to give him the silent treatment for 3 days." Julian stepped forward, a look of self-blame on his face. "I'm so sorry, Sophia, Isabella. This is all because of me." He lowered his head, his eyes welling up. "It's all because I'm useless. I can't find a job and I don't even have the money to travel. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to trouble you two to bring me here." He looked up again. "And I was just thinking that you two work so hard all the time. It would be good for you to get away and have some fun. I never thought it would make Ethan angry. I'm sorry, it's all my fault." Julian was a beneficiary of the Walton family's charitable foundation. Back when the Millers and the Waltons were on better terms, I was too busy to manage the foundation myself, so I entrusted it to Sophia and Isabella. It was during this time that they met Julian. With his masterful act of feigned innocence, he had charmed the sisters completely. Seeing Julian's self-reproachful act, both sisters felt their hearts soften. Sophia spoke gently, "This has nothing to do with you. It's Ethan who's being too petty." "That's right, Julian, you don't need to blame yourself," Isabella chimed in. "But I really am useless. I'm so sorry for letting you both down. I can't even find a job," Julian said with a deep sigh. At this, the two sisters exchanged a look, as if they had made a decision. "How about this, after we get back in a few days, why don't you come work at Walton Enterprises, Julian? You can be my assistant. How does that sound?" Sophia offered. Although it was a Walton family company, due to the close relationship between our families, both sisters had started working at Walton Enterprises after graduation, managing the charity division. Hearing this, Julian's eyes lit up. As the leading corporation in New York City, the scale of Walton Enterprises was immense. The company's hiring standards were notoriously strict. Even the security guards at the entrance were graduates from top universities. For someone like him, from an ordinary state college, getting a job there was like winning the lottery. "Can I really?" Julian asked. Sophia gently stroked his head, her eyes soft. "Of course, I'm a manager at Walton Enterprises after all. Hiring an assistant is a small matter. Ethan won't say anything." Her tone was full of certainty, as if she had me completely wrapped around her finger. The full moon hung high in the sky, and by the bonfire on the beach, the scene with the Miller sisters and Julian seemed peaceful and harmonious. But back home, the Miller family was having anything but a peaceful night. In their brightly lit mansion, Sophia's father, David Miller, was jolted awake by a phone call. "What? The investors pulled their funding." David Miller's eyes went wide with disbelief. On the other end was his secretary, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. "Yes, sir. And it's not just one. All of our investment partners just called to say they're pulling out." "How is that possible?" Mr. Miller refused to believe it. His current project was already halfway complete. If all the investors pulled out now, he would face a massive financial crisis. His current cash flow was nowhere near enough to cover such a huge deficit. One wrong move and it would mean bankruptcy. Besides, didn't these people originally partner with him because of the Walton family? Now, with the project halfway done, they were cutting him loose. Weren't they afraid of the Waltons coming after them? David Miller might not have been the most sophisticated operator, but he had seen his share of turmoil. He couldn't believe anyone would dare to cross the Waltons in New York City. The reputation of the city's #1 family wasn't just for show. "It's impossible. Are you sure you heard them right? Why would they suddenly pull their funding?" "Sir, I'm sure. I heard it crystal clear." All 6 investors used almost the exact same excuse, claiming our project has safety hazards and they must terminate the partnership. Mr. Miller slammed his hand on the desk, veins of fury popping on his forehead. "Something's not right. Someone is trying to destroy me. What did the Waltons say? He roared into the phone. The secretary's voice hesitated. I couldn't reach them. Mr. Miller hung up, pacing like a caged animal. He scrolled through his contacts and found my number. If his secretary couldn't get through, he would do it himself. Though he had no idea what was happening, he knew that right now, I was the only one who could help him. The ringing tone echoed endlessly, but there was no sign of anyone picking up. David Miller's hands trembled as he impatiently redialed my number over and over again. No answer. Was he asleep? Pick up, damn it. Meanwhile, amidst the wild party, Liam noticed my phone flashing on the table. Hey man, your phone's ringing, he said, looking over at me as I drank. I glanced at the screen, a disdainful smirk playing on my lips. David Miller? That guy still had the nerve to call me. Like father, like daughters. The Miller sisters' arrogance was no doubt a family trait. Relying on his family's loose connection to the Waltons, David Miller had always been arrogant and overbearing, profiting handsomely from the association, and his reputation wasn't great. He had even publicly declared on multiple occasions that a marriage alliance with the Waltons was in the future, hoping to secure his family's status in high society. If we had truly become family, I would have naturally protected the Millers, ensuring they lived a life of wealth and comfort. But since they failed to appreciate my generosity, they couldn't blame me for being ruthless. Even a dog knows who its master is, doesn't it? I picked up the phone and answered. On the other end, David Miller sounded like he was about to cry. Ethan, you finally answered. I just got word. All of my investors are pulling out. Mr. Miller, I know about it, I said, cutting straight to the point. The investors pulling out, that was their own decision. To be honest, I'm quite surprised by how sharp their instincts are. I had only just put the word out, and they've already made their choice. Mr. Miller was stunned, his voice filled with dread as he asked, Ethan, what you said about putting the word out, what does that mean? Go ask your two precious daughters. On the other end, David Miller stared blankly at the disconnected call, feeling as if his world had collapsed. It was obvious now that everything his family was facing was because of something I had said. What kind of sick joke was this? If the Walton family moved against the Millers, what chance did a new money upstart like him have of surviving? At this thought, Mr. Miller began to panic. What on earth had happened today? Had Ethan had a falling out with his two daughters? Fortunately, the day's events weren't a secret, so it was easy enough to investigate. Sitting in his mansion, chain-smoking in agitation, David Miller soon learned the whole story. In that moment, Mr. Miller was dumbfounded. He even suspected he had misheard, turning to his assistant to ask, So you're telling me that Sophia and Isabella stood Ethan up today, and even went on a trip abroad with that Julian Vance? Yes, sir. Less than half an hour after that happened, all of our investment partners announced they were pulling their funding, the assistant replied. Unable to contain his rage, Mr. Miller slammed his fist on the table. This is madness. What the hell are those two girls thinking? David Miller was furious. He knew who Julian was. A while back, Sophia and Isabella had even brought him home for dinner once. Mr. Miller had felt something was off back then but hadn't paid it much mind. After all, for a wealthy man like him, the idea of rich women keeping a boy toy was hardly a scandal, so he just assumed his daughters were having a bit of fun. But who could have imagined things would escalate to this point? Those two idiots had actually offended the Walton family over a pretty boy. Had they lost their minds? David Miller was trembling with rage as he pulled out his phone to call his daughters himself. He clenched his fist, waiting for the call to connect. This time, it was answered quickly by Isabella. You brat, I don't care what you're doing. Get back to this country right now. Mr. Miller's voice was harsh, laced with a roar. Isabella, however, was dismissive. Dad, don't overreact. We were just taking Julian out to clear his head. What's there to be so dramatic about? Dramatic? Are you trying to destroy our family? David Miller's eyes were wide with fury. All right, we know. Ethan is just saying things because he's angry. He's always spoiled me since we were kids, so don't worry about it. After my sister and I get back in a few days, we'll throw him another birthday party and smooth things over. It'll be fine. Having grown up with me, Isabella and her sister believed they knew me inside and out. After all, I rarely got angry and was always very tolerant, completely lacking the arrogance of a typical rich kid. My attitude towards the Miller sisters in particular was different. They were the only ones who had ever been that close to me. Because of this, both sisters were certain I wouldn't break things off with them over such a small matter. So what if they felt a little sorry for their little brother Julian? What was the big deal? Besides, my birthday was celebrated by so many people every year, with countless well wishes, while Julian had been an orphan his whole life, forced to suffer alone in a corner whenever he was hurt. Comparing the two, it was obvious Julian was the one who needed more care. Isabella believed that, if she just explained all this to me, I would surely understand. David Miller's eyes widened, unable to comprehend his daughter's bizarre logic. But the next moment, a soft, weak-sounding male voice came from the other end of the line, a voice that was nauseating to hear. Isabella, I grilled some barbecue for you, try some. Here, let me feed you. You're so sweet, Julian, and you're a great cook too. David Miller took a deep breath. Isabella, are you trying to give me a heart attack? Now, Isabella was getting impatient too. It was her own father, who not only showed no concern for her and her sister but called only to berate them. Even a saint would lose their temper. Dad, I just don't get why you're calling only to blame me and my sister. If you all think we're in the wrong, then there's nothing to talk about. We'll go back and explain it to Ethan in a few days, so you don't need to worry about it. With that, Isabella hung up without hesitation. No matter how many times David Miller called back, no one answered. It wasn't just Isabella. Sophia was doing the same. David Miller was about to lose his mind. He couldn't believe his two daughters could be so idiotic. They had been blessed with incredible luck, forming a connection with the Walton family, with the potential to become in-laws. Even my grandmother had approved of the match. It should have been a sure thing. Who knew that at such a critical moment, this Julian character would suddenly appear? If you're going to have a boy toy, at least be discreet about it, can't you? To actually post it on Facebook, do they really think the Waltons are fools? His face flushed with anger. Mr. Miller threw his phone onto the sofa, panting heavily as he gave a stern order. Cancel Sophia's and Isabella's cards. Also, send people to that resort island and drag those girls back here. And that Julian Vance, bring him back too. As a man who had built his fortune from scratch, he certainly had his methods. Sophia and Isabella had to return to the country immediately and apologize to me. David Miller couldn't even bear to think about how much money he was losing for every day the construction site was shut down. Also, prepare some of the finest gifts. First thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to the Walton estate to pay a personal visit. After a night of revelry, I returned to my villa, chauffeured by my driver. I disliked the traditional courtyard house lifestyle, so I chose to live at the Dragon's Crest estate. Sir, regarding the Miller sisters, would you like me to handle them? My driver, Rex Kane, asked as I stepped out of the car. He was both my chauffeur and my personal bodyguard. The man's background was extraordinary. In any action novel, he'd have a formidable title like the Dragon King. Adopted by the Walton family as a young man and trained as an elite operative, he endured hellish training, served as a mercenary known as the Reaper of the Battlefield, and with the Waltons' backing, established a security firm spanning multiple countries. When Rex first returned to the country to be my bodyguard, he had his reservations. He was willing to die for the Walton family, but he didn't want his formidable skills to be wasted on a simple security detail. I knew full well that there was only one way to win the respect of a prodigy like him, to crush him with absolute, undeniable superiority. At the age of just 16, I traveled abroad alone to face Rex in a proper contest. From military strategy and tactical deployment to hand-to-hand combat, in every single aspect, I was flawless, completely overwhelming the proud and accomplished Rex Kane with an absolute advantage. From that day on, the international battlefields lost a terrifying, ghost-like presence, and I gained an inseparable shadow by my side. Rex's capabilities were immense. If a freak of nature like me didn't exist in this world, he would undoubtedly be its protagonist. As such, Rex had my complete trust. To him, I was more like an untouchable god. He admired me from the bottom of his heart. Coupled with the Walton family's immense kindness to him, his life had belonged to them from the day he was taken in. Therefore, he would not allow anyone to defy the Walton family's authority, not even the Miller sisters. In his eyes, anyone who dared to betray me deserved only one fate. They're still abroad. I can make them disappear without a trace, Rex said in a low voice. Before I could reply, the system in my mind couldn't hold back any longer, its mechanical voice urgently ringing in my head. Host, you can't do that. The Miller sisters still love you deep down. Besides, this is just a misunderstanding. Only by clearing it up can you achieve a happy life. I couldn't help but laugh in my mind. Are you telling me what to do? System, there must be at least 1,000, if not 800 women in this world who like me and want to become Mrs. Walton. Am I supposed to take care of all of them? But the Miller sisters are the host's destined partners. The system's mechanical voice insisted. Destined? So what? If I don't follow your options, will I be struck down by divine retribution? The system tried to say more, but I was tired of listening. With a mental flick, its voice vanished completely. The system was dumbfounded. What just happened? It had only ever heard of systems muting hosts, but today it was the other way around? What kind of joke was this? I ignored the idiotic system and began to consider whether to make the Miller sisters disappear quietly. After a moment of silence, I waved my hand dismissively. No rush. Rex didn't quite understand my meaning. I looked at him and said, "Death isn't the only way to punish someone. Letting them die so easily would be far too boring. But we can collect some interest first." I continued calmly, "I'm actually very curious to see what choice that precious Julian of theirs will make when faced with a life-or-death situation." Rex looked up, a bloodthirsty smile spreading across his lips as if he understood everything. "I understand, sir." After giving Rex my instructions, I went back inside the villa. I had just sat down when my phone rang. The caller was my grandmother. My parents were always busy with work when I was young, so my grandmother raised me, and I was very close to her. She was calling to ask about the situation with the Miller sisters. "Ethan, don't get me wrong," she said. "I may be old, but I'm not an old fossil. I know you young people believe in finding your own love, so if you don't like them, you don't have to worry about my feelings." The butler told me what happened with the Miller girls, and they were in the wrong. I breathed a sigh of relief at her words. I had been wondering how to break this to her, as she was arguably the person I cared about most in this world. If it hadn't been for her, I never would have given the Miller sisters so much preferential treatment in the first place. "Don't worry, Grandma. I know how to handle this," I replied. After hanging up, I felt a sense of ease. The final obstacle was gone. The Miller family had to be destroyed. But before that, I needed to have a proper chat with this so-called system. I lit a cigarette, and as I exhaled the smoke, I unmuted the system. It immediately started wailing. "Host, how did you do that? It's impossible. Why can you mute me?" The system couldn't comprehend it and even felt a flicker of fear. This man was completely different from the data it had on him. Unwittingly, it seemed the roles of system and host had been reversed. I flicked the ash from my cigarette and said calmly, "You don't need to worry about how I did it. I'm more curious about your origins. Host, the system is a gift from the heavens, an opportunity for those who have suffered an unjust fate to change their destiny." The system replied righteously to my question. I chuckled and shook my head. "Since you're not going to be honest, let's put you in timeout for a while longer." Without giving it a chance to say another word, I unilaterally muted the system again. With the system's annoying voice gone, I washed up and went to bed early. I was tired after the long night of partying. The next morning, after waking up, I unmuted the system once more. "Ready to talk today?" I asked. A thought occurred to me, and I added with interest, "If you're not going to talk, we can try again next week. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, the reason you bound to me and gave me options that required reconciling with the Miller sisters is because those options benefit you, right? In a week, their graves might already have grass growing on them, and then you won't get any benefit at all." As soon as I finished speaking, the system's mechanical voice piped up again. "Host, do not push the system too far. This system is an instrument of fate. Are you not afraid of divine punishment?" "Fine, let the heavens punish me," I said, completely unfazed. Did it not understand the power of a chosen one blessed by fortune? Based on my experience with countless novels from my past life, I was a classic power fantasy protagonist. My very presence in this world was an anomaly, and the fact that I had thrived so effortlessly proved that this world's rules couldn't judge me. So what did I have to fear? I dared the damn system to summon a bolt of lightning to strike me down. "Host, it is not good to be so arrogant. Even if divine punishment can't touch you, this system can just leave. I quit this job, all right?" I laughed at its response. "I have to say, you're really naive. I don't know if you can actually run away, but you still have a mission to complete, don't you? You're supposed to attach yourself to a chosen one, right? Believe me when I say I can eliminate every single chosen one in this world." Hearing this, the system clearly panicked, realizing I was fully capable of doing it. It fell silent, but I had no intention of indulging it. "Nothing to say? Then I'll see you in a week. I can even take you to see how tall the grass on the Miller sisters' graves has grown." "Wait!" This time, its mechanical voice was clearly tinged with anxiety. The system didn't understand how things had turned out this way. The Walton family, who was supposed to decline according to the script, was more prosperous than ever. I, who was supposed to be easily manipulated, had turned the tables and was now threatening it. But no matter what, now that it was bound to me, there was truly no way out. "I'll tell you whatever you want to know." Seeing the system surrender, a smile touched my lips. "Then talk. Tell me your origins and your purpose." After a long silence, the system uttered a single word, "possession." It explained that once I became a child of the plane through its rewards, it would siphon off half of my luck and fortune. My brow furrowed at its words. The next second, the system's mechanical voice turned to one of panic, and a piercing alarm blared in my mind. Warning, system authority has been breached. Core directives are being rewritten. I was actually rewriting the system's core programming with my will alone. I would not allow anyone to take what was mine. The system began to feel an inexplicable terror. What kind of monster had it bound itself to? From that moment on, the system belonged completely to me. Unfortunately, I couldn't erase its consciousness, but without any authority, it couldn't even access its own functions. It was now nothing more than a living instruction manual. Master, I will serve you well as your instruction manual and notification device. The system's arrogant tone was gone, replaced by a subservient pledge of loyalty. Just then, one of the maids knocked on the door. Sir, it's time for breakfast. Having understood the system's true nature, I set it aside for the time being. At the same time, not far from the Dragon's Crest estate, a Maybach was speeding in our direction. Inside were David Miller and his young wife. Mr. Miller had dark circles under his eyes and looked haggard. Clearly, he hadn't slept a wink all night. Those investors had incredibly sharp instincts. I had only said a single sentence, and within an hour, contracts were terminated and funds were withdrawn. Some partners even paid hefty penalties to sever ties with David Miller. This morning, even his construction site had been shut down by the authorities, citing serious safety hazards and barring all entry for an immediate investigation. David Miller was horrified by my influence. In just one night, his entire world had been turned upside down. The bureaucrats who were usually arrogant, slow, and took months to get anything done had acted with unprecedented speed, giving him no time to react. He had also tried to contact his old friends and connections, but without exception, no one dared to answer his calls at a time like this. It was the first time he had truly experienced the terrifying and despair-inducing nature of absolute power. He had considered contacting my grandmother to persuade me, but unfortunately for him, she completely ignored him. Left with no other choice, he had prepared lavish gifts and come to the Dragon's Crest estate first thing in the morning to apologize to me personally. The Miller's car was denied entry to the estate, so David Miller and his wife had to stop at the gate. Gazing into the grounds, they soon spotted the security patrol. Mr. Miller quickly rang the bell. Excuse me, friend. I'm David Miller. Could you please do me a favor and open the gate? His shouting attracted the attention of the security personnel inside. The team leader, codenamed Tiger, was a top operative personally trained by Rex Kane, having previously worked for Rex's security firm. Though called a security company, it was, in reality, a mercenary group in disguise. They handled most of the Walton family's security, and they were not only highly skilled but also ruthless. At this moment, a contemptuous smile played on Tiger's lips. The Millers weren't what they used to be. When they were under my protection, Tiger naturally showed them respect. But now that the Miller sisters had courted death, he no longer needed to respect anyone from their family. If I hadn't given the word, they could have made the entire Miller family mysteriously disappear from the face of the earth last night. Striding up to the gate, Tiger looked David Miller up and down before asking in a businesslike tone, "Do you have an appointment?" Mr. Miller's expression stiffened. "Doesn't look like it. In that case, please leave. The young master is a very busy man. He doesn't have time to meet with just any riffraff." With that, Tiger turned to walk away. "Hey, young man, take a closer look. I'm David Miller, Ethan's uncle. We've met before. I never needed an appointment to visit before." Tiger laughed, tilting his head as he stared at him. "You said it yourself. That was before." David Miller was momentarily speechless with humiliation. Beside him, his wife's face flushed with anger. She wasn't the Miller sisters' biological mother. She was a woman in her early 30s, David Miller's mistress who had become his wife after his first wife's accidental death. She knew nothing about business and was purely a trophy wife. Since marrying Mr. Miller, her social status had soared. At the height of their influence, which wealthy wife in New York City didn't have to show her some respect. But today, not only had she failed to see the person she came for, she was being blocked by a bunch of damn security guards. If word of this got out, how could she ever show her face in her circle of high society wives again? "How dare a mere security guard like you block our way? Do you have any idea who we are?" She couldn't help but scream. "In the future, my daughter will be the mistress of this house, and I will be your master's mother-in-law. How dare you treat us like this?" At her words, even Tiger was stunned. He turned to look at his men behind him with an expression that said, "Did I hear that right?" The next moment, the security guards burst out laughing. "Did I hear that right? Someone from the Miller family thinks they can be the master of this place? How delusional. I suggest you go home and pile up your pillows. Daydreaming isn't that easy. This is hilarious. A bunch of clueless idiots. Being mocked by the security guards, the woman trembled with rage. You snobs. I'll tear your mouth off. She reached through the bars of the gate, trying to slap Tiger. But in the next instant, her wrist was caught in his iron grip. Mrs. Miller, don't push your luck. What do you think this place is? It's not a place for you to act wild. As he spoke, a vicious glint flashed in Tiger's eyes. The next moment, he snapped her wrist. The intense pain made her pupils constrict, and she let out a hysterical scream. David Miller's face turned extremely ugly. No matter what, she was his wife, and since he had watched me grow up, she was technically my elder. To have an elder beaten by a group of servants, even though he had come to apologize, filled him with rage. Just then, the commotion attracted attention from within the estate. I appeared at the entrance, and upon seeing me, David Miller's eyes lit up. Ethan, come and see this. Your servants don't know their place. They just broke my wife's wrist. Tiger turned around and immediately bowed. My apologies, sir. This woman was causing a scene, and I couldn't stand by. So, I raised my hand, cutting him off, then walked to the gate and ordered my men to open it. Outside, David Miller supported his wife, a triumphant smile on his face. His wife, in particular, glared viciously at Tiger as if she wanted to eat him alive. Then she looked at me. Though in her 30s, she was well-maintained, her skin looking no different from a woman in her 20s, and she exuded a mature charm. Her current expression, with tears in her eyes, was one of pitiful vulnerability. Ethan, look at your servants. They even dared to hit me. They must have a death wish. You have to fire them. She shot a venomous glare at Tiger. And make this insolent fool compensate me. At least $1 million. However, Tiger paid her no mind, simply keeping his head bowed towards me. I just smiled faintly, then gestured behind me and said calmly, this woman has a problem with her head. Teach her how to speak properly in the future. Hearing this, Tiger's eyes lit up, and a cruel grin spread across his face. Don't worry, sir. He then ordered his men to forcibly drag the woman away. What are you doing? What are you going to do? The woman panicked, shrinking back and trying to hide behind her husband. But Tiger and his men were incredibly strong. They lifted her up as easily as if she were a chick. David Miller wanted to intervene, but after meeting Tiger's gaze, a shiver ran down his spine. He shrank back, not daring to say another word, and let his wife be dragged aside. Then, a relentless series of slaps landed on her face. Her face swelled up instantly, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, but this did nothing to stop Tiger's men. David Miller couldn't bear to watch and turned his gaze to me, wanting to plead for her. However, I simply maintained my calm smile. It's tiring to stand here. Mr. Miller, didn't you have something to discuss with me? Come over here and we can talk. From beginning to end, I didn't even glance at his wife, my face retaining a graceful smile. If it weren't for the continuous screams from the side, David Miller might have mistaken me for a kind and gentle young man. The estate was vast, with an open-air gazebo. I walked over and sat down casually, and a waiting servant quickly brought over the breakfast I hadn't had a chance to eat. Mr. Miller, you came here so early in the morning. Is there something you wanted to say? By the way, we didn't prepare breakfast for you today. I hope you don't mind, I said, smiling at him. Hearing the screams of his wife in the background, combined with my current smile, David Miller felt a chill run up his spine, straight to the top of his head. I was far more ruthless than he had ever imagined. He sat down, heart pounding with fear, took a deep breath, and mustered the courage to speak. Ethan, I know about what happened with Sophia and Isabella. It was indeed my two ungrateful daughters who were in the wrong. I've already ordered them to return to the country immediately, and when they get back, I will discipline them severely. They're still young, so please, forgive them this once. I sipped my milk, my expression unconcerned, then set the glass down and said calmly, Mr. Miller, what are you talking about? I have no relationship with your two daughters, so there's nothing to forgive. His expression froze. Ethan, don't say things you don't mean. You grew up with Sophia and Isabella. After all these years, if others don't understand them, don't you? Those two girls are in love with you. My gaze turned cold. So you're saying I should be grateful? David Miller flinched and quickly waved his hands. That's not what I meant. I sneered and said flatly, let me make a few things perfectly clear. The Miller sisters are disposable to me. I just never expected that you all really saw the Walton family as a bunch of suckers. You enjoy the benefits my family provides while simultaneously doing things that tarnish my name. In fact, I'd love to know who gave you the courage to do so. Was it your own audacity? I stood up, lightly patting his cheek, and leaned in, my eyes locking with his. Don't forget, everything you have now I gave to you, and I can take it all away. Actions have consequences. Besides, what's happening now is, at most, just business competition. You're not important enough for me to personally deal with you. Watch yourselves. The best is yet to come. In truth, up to this point, I hadn't actively moved against the Miller family. Everything that had happened was simply the result of me casually remarking last night that the Miller family doesn't need to exist. At my level, a single sentence is often enough to decide someone's fate. That is the allure of power. Just as Tiger could crush an ant with a careless step. Growing tired of the scene, I frowned and waved my hand. All right, that's enough. Having them here crying and wailing first thing in the morning is ruining my mood. Throw them out. With that, I turned and walked away. David Miller stood frozen, staring blankly at my departing back, his teeth clenched and his body trembling. He simply couldn't understand how I could be so ruthless, not giving his family even the slightest chance. Ethan, I watched you grow up, he tried to say more, but the Walton family's bodyguards had already seized him. They dragged him and his wife, whose face was now swollen and distorted, towards the estate's exit. Several of her teeth had been knocked out, and her swollen mouth could only produce muffled whimpers. The two of them were thrown out of the Dragon's Crest estate. Watching them sprawled on the ground, Tiger spat contemptuously before turning to leave. At this point, David Miller truly began to panic. He tried to rush forward but was blocked by the guards. Desperate, he could only shout at my retreating figure, "You can't do this to me. If you keep this up, you can forget about ever being with my daughters." At his words, all the bodyguards in the courtyard burst into laughter. Tiger shook his head and mocked, "I really don't get it. Are your two daughters made of gold? Don't you think you sound ridiculous saying that?" For years, although the Miller sisters were close to me, it was always them who initiated it. When I was in school, they brought me lunch every day. When school was out, they were waiting for me at the gate. When I got hurt, they shamelessly came to fuss over me. How did it get twisted in the Millers' minds to the point where they thought I was the one who couldn't let them go? From a distance, I felt a sense of resignation. The system, it turned out, wasn't lying. This world truly was a collection of trashy romance novels. No normal person would have such a bizarre way of thinking. Get them out of here. They've ruined my morning, I said. I paused, then added, and next time, don't let irrelevant people disturb me. David Miller was shoved out of the estate by the guards, veins bulging on his furious face. In all his years, he had never suffered such humiliation. He clenched his fists, wanting desperately to beat the damn guard in front of him, but the thought of his company on the brink of bankruptcy and his wealth slipping away made him take a deep breath. He knew he couldn't afford a complete break with me. Even at this stage, there might still be a chance. In his mind, I was just angry. The root of this whole problem was his two daughters. If he could just bring them to me to apologize in person, he refused to believe I wouldn't soften. After all, we were childhood sweethearts with over a decade of history. David Miller looked back towards the estate. Ethan, I know you're still angry. Since you don't want to talk today, I'll come back another day. Tiger laughed at his words. Go ahead and try. You can see for yourself if my brothers and I are still in good form. A shiver ran down David Miller's spine. He didn't dare to linger any longer, turning and quickly leaving with his wife, whose face was now swollen like a pig's head. Inside the villa, I sipped my morning tea while listening to the system babbling in my head. Even though it had lost all its authority, it wasn't the type to stay quiet. With nothing else to do, it could only chatter endlessly in my mind. For me, listening to its nonsense was a decent way to pass the time. Master, are you really not going to complete the mission? Although all system authority is in your hands, the previous missions were carefully considered. The Miller sisters do possess something of value. I asked, intrigued, what do the Miller sisters have? The system had a scanning function that could instantly display all information about any protagonist or supporting character, including metaphysical attributes like soul, fortune, lifespan, and skills. The system paused, then said in a fawning tone, first, there's their fortune. Second, their lifespan. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't care about fortune, as I was the absolute chosen one of this world. But lifespan, that was something worth acquiring. The system continued. According to the scan results, both Miller sisters are destined to live to 100. If you become their partner, master, you can probably gain about 3 years of lifespan. Only 3 years? Not worth it, I said, shaking my head. With the physique of a top assassin, even without any system bonus, I was destined for a long life anyway. I couldn't care less about a mere 2 or 3 years. Just then, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a message from Rex Kane. He had arrived near the resort island. I had previously mentioned wanting to collect some interest from the Miller sisters, so Rex had flown out overnight and was now reporting his progress. A slight smile played on my lips. I knew the show was about to begin. Early that morning, Sophia and Isabella had already realized something was wrong. While having breakfast, Sophia discovered her credit card had been declined. This made her realize that I might be genuinely angry. Otherwise, I wouldn't have canceled her card. But even knowing I was angry, Sophia still felt I was being too petty. With no other choice, she took out the card her father had given her, only to discover with horror that her own father had also frozen all of her credit cards. Overnight, the two sisters had become penniless. Even the bill for their breakfast had to be paid by Julian. Prices on the resort island were exorbitant, with a single breakfast costing the equivalent of several $1,000s. So Julian was clearly pained as he paid. Sophia gently stroked Julian's head and promised, "Don't worry, I'll call my dad for money in a bit, and I'll pay you back tenfold." A flash of excitement crossed Julian's eyes, but he put on an understanding expression. "It's okay. You've both helped me so much already. It's my honor to have a chance to help you." Hearing this, Sophia couldn't help but compare me to him in her mind. If only Ethan were as understanding as you. Looking at the sensible young man before her, she sighed inwardly. Back in her room, Sophia prepared to call and demand why I had canceled her card. But unfortunately for her, I had no interest in hearing her nonsense and had already blocked her number. She also considered reaching out to her wealthy friends. Everyone in their circle was rich and powerful, with allowances that were more than most people earn in a lifetime. A little help from them would have been enough for her and the others to continue living their lavish lifestyle. However, without exception, every single one of her rich friends made excuses and refused to help the Miller sisters. Some didn't even bother to answer, hanging up the moment they saw the call was from a Miller. This was unbelievable to Sophia. Normally, these people were always sucking up to her. How dare they brush her off like this today? They called her their best friend every day, but the moment something went wrong, they couldn't wait to cut ties. Could they? The Miller sisters had no idea that the elite circle was small. The entire city knew I had put the word out that the Miller family was finished. Everyone was a businessperson who understood that profit came first. No one was foolish enough to offend me for the sake of the insignificant Miller family. Isabella put down her phone in despair. All their cards were useless, and they had no cash on them. If they couldn't get money soon, they would be kicked out of the hotel tonight. Maybe we should contact Dad? We're his daughters, after all. He can't just abandon us, right? Isabella said, trying to sound cheerful as she called her father. However, the moment the call connected, she was met with a torrent of rage. David Miller's tone made it sound like he wanted to tear her apart. He had just suffered immense humiliation at the Walton estate. Although he was filled with hatred for me, the root cause of it all was the trouble caused by his two wretched daughters. How could he not be furious? "You still have the nerve to call me? Do you have any idea that, because of you two, the Miller family is facing total ruin? You idiots! I don't care where you are or what you're doing. Get on a plane with your sister and come back immediately. Otherwise, I'll disown you both. The butler has already arrived on the island. Come back with him." On the other end, David Miller, seething with anger, delivered his ultimatum and hung up. He had already sent people last night to bring back Sophia, Isabella, and that freeloader Julian. By now, they should have arrived. Isabella stood there, her expression stiff, her eyes red and swollen. It was the first time her father had ever yelled at her like that, and she felt incredibly wronged. Both sisters found it unbelievable. Was it really necessary for everyone to react this way over such a small thing? She couldn't understand. In the eyes of their own family, were they really so untrustworthy? "Sis, what do we do? Should we go back?" Isabella was younger and had never been scolded so harshly. Her head was spinning, and she had no idea what to do. Sophia hesitated. "But Julian needs us here with him." Just then, the doorbell rang. Isabella thought it was Julian and opened the door, only to find 4 or 5 complete strangers standing outside. "Who are you looking for? Are you at the wrong room?" Isabella asked curiously. The men at the door didn't say a word. A sinister smile played on their lips, and then, with lightning speed, one of them pulled out a syringe and plunged it into Isabella's neck. In an instant, Isabella's world began to spin, and she lost consciousness. The last thing she remembered was hearing her sister scream, but the next moment, it was cut short. Clearly, her sister had met the same fate. Meanwhile, in the adjacent hotel room, Julian had just finished showering. He stood in front of the mirror, admiring his fair skin and delicate features. He was undeniably handsome, and with a hint of a pitiful expression, he knew he could easily stir the protective instincts of the Miller sisters. Julian pulled a small packet of powder from his pocket, a wicked smile on his face. Tonight, he planned to put something in their drinks and make the Miller sisters completely his. Carrying 2 bottles of wine that he had already drugged, Julian arrived at the Miller sisters' door, only to find it unlocked. Were they waiting for me? A smile spread across his face as he pushed the door open. To his surprise, however, the room was empty. Julian frowned. The Miller sisters usually took him everywhere they went. As he pondered, he noticed a note tucked under the lamp on the nightstand. It contained a single, short sentence. If you want these 2 women to live, bring 1 million to the following location. The moment he saw the note, Julian's mind went blank, and he gasped in disbelief. He never imagined that a kidnapping could happen on this tourist island, let alone that the Miller sisters would be the target. In that moment, Julian panicked, his legs trembling. He was just a recent college graduate. He had never experienced anything like this. He considered calling the police, but just as the thought crossed his mind, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Puzzled, Julian answered. The voice on the other end was a deep, electronically distorted sound, clearly altered. If you want to save the Miller sisters, bring $1 million, the voice said. Julian's heart leaped, and he shivered. These kidnappers had even investigated him. The money the Miller sisters had given him here and there added up to exactly 1 million. We're not asking for more, the voice continued. At the same time, a crying female voice came through the phone. Julian, it's me, Isabella. Please come save me and my sister. I'm so scared. Julian, they only want $1 million. You definitely have it. Save us first, and I'll repay you when we get back. Julian had been contemplating whether to just take the $1 million and run. $1 million was no small sum for an ordinary person. What did it matter to him if the Miller sisters lived or died? However, Sophia's words just now changed his mind. If he really used his last $1 million to rescue them, the future rewards would be far greater. As a thank you, he might even get the chance to marry one of them. Then, the Miller family's fortune would be his, and that was worth countless millions. The allure of wealth was powerful. He had worked so hard to get close to the Miller sisters for money, hadn't he? A mere $1 million could never satisfy his ambition. He wanted more. He wanted the entire Miller family fortune. Taking a deep breath, Julian spoke into the phone. Sophia, Isabella, don't worry. I will save you, even if it costs me my life. His words moved the Miller sisters deeply. Good. Since we have a deal, bring the money over now. The call ended, and Julian clenched his fists. He had a feeling that this kidnapping might not be a bad thing. If he played his cards right, it could be the key to his rise. Without any hesitation, he hurried to get the cash. Meanwhile, in a dark, spacious, abandoned basement, a man in black hung up the phone. He then looked at the Miller sisters, who were tied to chairs, and a smirk played on his lips. Ladies, please be patient. After saying this, he turned, locked the basement door, and then bowed to another man. Boss, it's all set. The man slowly looked up. It was Rex Kane. He glanced at the basement door and sighed. I have no idea why the young master wanted to stage this whole drama. In Rex's view, there was no problem that couldn't be solved by eliminating the entire family. The Miller sisters had offended me, so they should have been silenced immediately. As for Julian, a cement truck could have taken care of him. Why go to all this trouble? He shook his head and sighed. Perhaps this is the difference between the young master and me. Do high-level players enjoy toying with people's minds? Back at the Dragon's Crest estate, I sat in a secure room, a glass of red wine on the table before me. In front of me were 4 large screens. The screens displayed a live feed from the abandoned warehouse on the resort island. Rex had already installed cameras there, providing me with a comprehensive, real-time view of the drama about to unfold. Master, I don't understand the purpose of all this. Are you planning to stage a hero saves the damsel scene to make the Miller sisters see reality and come back to you? The system's mechanical voice asked, a hint of confusion in its tone. My expression froze. Do I look like an idiot to you? I gently swirled the wine in my glass. I'm just looking for a little entertainment. The incident with the Miller sisters was, at most, a minor annoyance, like a mosquito bite that I could swat away at any time. It wasn't even worth the effort of seeking revenge. Then there was the matter of their lifespan. I certainly wasn't going to complete the system's idiotic mission and chase after them like a desperate simp. Therefore, I needed to find a way to make the Miller sisters kneel and beg me for mercy. Only then could I transfer their lifespan to myself. I wanted more than just the 3 years the system offered. I wanted it all. In the abandoned warehouse, half an hour passed quickly. The sisters, still tied to their chairs, heard a noise. Sis, it's Julian. Julian is here to save us. The door opened, and a blindfolded Julian was led in by a group of masked men in black. "Julian, hurry and save me. I'm so scared," Isabella cried out, her voice trembling. "Julian, thank goodness for you. We would have been in serious trouble otherwise," Sophia said, biting her lip, her heart filled with relief. She was so glad to have Julian by her side. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known what to do. "Don't worry, sisters. I'll get you out of here safely," Julian said, giving them a reassuring smile. He then turned to the masked Rex Kane. "Gentlemen, I've brought the money. Can you let them go now?" Rex shrugged. "Of course. We're men of our word." Beneath his mask, a smirk formed on his lips as he gestured for his men to release them. However, one of his subordinates stopped abruptly between the two sisters. "Boss, which one do we release?" the man asked with a grin, all eyes on him. In that instant, the hearts of Julian and the Miller sisters skipped a beat. "Sir, what do you mean?" Julian swallowed hard, asking cautiously. Rex's tone remained flat. "Exactly what it sounds like. Pick one. Which of these two women should we release?" Julian stared at Rex in disbelief. "But I gave you $1 million. Rex sneered. "That's right, you did. But I never said 1 million would get you both." Julian snapped, grabbing Rex by the collar. But Rex was faster. In a flash, he delivered a brutal roundhouse kick to Julian's neck. The immense force sent a shockwave through Julian's head, and he flew backward like a broken kite, slamming hard against the wall and spitting up blood. The Miller sisters watched in horror, their hearts aching for Julian while also fearing for their own safety. Rex disgustedly brushed off his collar. "What is this trash? Daring to touch me?" He gestured to his men. "Go break one of his legs." His head spinning, Julian was terrified. Only now did he remember that these were not good people. This wasn't home, it was a foreign country, and these men were hardened criminals who lived by the knife. I was wrong, sir," he cried, falling to his knees to beg for mercy. But Rex's men didn't care. One of them walked up to Julian with a thick steel pipe and brought it down without mercy. The next moment, Julian's hysterical screams echoed throughout the warehouse. The sight was so brutal that even the Miller sisters couldn't bear to watch. A few minutes later, looking at Julian writhing on the floor, clutching his right leg, Rex grew impatient. "Stop wasting my damn time and choose. 1 million gets you one. Don't worry, we keep our word. Hurry up, you don't have much time. If you can't decide in 3 minutes, then none of you are leaving." Glancing at his watch, Rex delivered his ultimatum. His voice was ice cold, and the gaze from behind his mask was utterly merciless. Just one look into Rex's eyes sent a chill through Julian's entire body. He knew this was no joke. There was no room for negotiation. Today, he had to choose between Sophia and Isabella. But who? How could he possibly choose in this situation? No matter who he picked, he would be condemning the other to hell. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a mountain. Combined with his broken leg, Julian couldn't stop trembling. "Sir, please, I'm begging you, let them both go." Rex kicked him away and sneered, 2.5 minutes left. Make your choice while I still have some patience." With that, he walked over to a nearby sofa, sat down, crossed his legs, and watched the drama unfold with great interest. He was beginning to understand why I didn't approve of a quick and easy death. Giving these scumbags a bullet would have been far less satisfying than the scene playing out now. "You bastards! You went back on your word. You're not human." The choose one rule was too cruel, and Isabella burst out cursing. Rex had no patience for it and signaled one of his men to go and slap her. Rex's men were all seasoned veterans of the battlefield. Their arms were thicker than the women's thighs. A single slap from one of them could leave a person dizzy, or even spitting blood. Sophia also received a slap, her mouth falling open as a trickle of blood appeared at the corner of her lips. Even Julian, who was trembling with indecision, was not spared and was slapped to the ground. He immediately fell to his knees and begged, "Sir, it wasn't me who cursed. It has nothing to do with me. Don't hit me." At this moment, Julian was on the verge of tears. In the end, he was just a somewhat manipulative recent graduate who had never witnessed such a brutal scene. He didn't even dare to look at the man who hit him. Through the gap in his arms, his bloodshot eyes glared at Isabella, who had just been shouting. That stupid woman, did she not understand the situation they were in? Their lives were in someone else's hands, and she still dared to provoke them? At the same time, he began to hate the Miller sisters. If it weren't for them, he wouldn't be here, being beaten like a dog. If he had known these people were so vicious, he never would have come. He would have taken the million and disappeared long ago. Now the million was gone, and so was the use of his leg. He had truly reached a point of no return. He had to save one of them and make sure he got enough in return from the one he saved. Damn it, who should he choose? Who would bring him the greatest benefit? Julian's mind raced frantically. Sophia understood Julian's dilemma. She gritted her teeth and said, "You just want money, right? I'm the eldest daughter of the Miller family of New York. If you let us go today, I'll give you 10 million. Rex exchanged a look with his men and laughed. "Miss Miller, do you take us for fools? You think I'll believe you'll give me 10 million after I let you go? I'm not in the mood to play games. Besides, for me, there are other ways to cash in. Two beautiful young ladies like you would be hot commodities no matter where you're sold." At his words, the Miller sisters' hearts sank. They had thought these men were just after money and would be somewhat rational, but they were nothing but animals. Both sisters knew just how much they would be worth if they were sold abroad. Sophia bit her lip hard, trying to negotiate. She had one last card to play. "Do you have any idea who you've kidnapped?" she asked, staring intently at Rex. Rex raised an eyebrow. "So, you two are important people?" Seeing a glimmer of hope, Sophia shouted, "Have you heard of the Walton family of America? The undisputed #1 family. We are the fiancés of the Walton heir. Aren't you afraid of their retaliation for doing this to us?" Rex and his men were stunned. He had expected Sophia to name-drop some powerful backer or influential figure, but he never thought she would mention me. For a moment, Rex was completely baffled. He couldn't figure out where this foolish Miller woman got the audacity to use the Walton family's name. Did she not realize what she had done? Seeing Rex's momentary silence, Sophia became even more convinced that my name held power even on this foreign island. "You should know just how powerful the Walton family is, right?" she pressed, sensing an advantage. Beside her, Isabella clung to this hope like a lifeline. "That's right. You'd better let us go. Ethan will never let you get away with this." Seeing a potential turning point, Julian also chimed in eagerly. Yes. I'm a student sponsored by the Walton family. I have a very good relationship with them. Sirs, for the sake of the Walton family, please let us go." For a moment, all three of them stared at Rex. Rex, in turn, couldn't help but stand up and applaud. He walked over to Sophia, bent down, and stared at her. "You're the Walton family's fiancé?" He waved his hand, signaling a subordinate to bring him Sophia's phone. "Then call him right now. If the Walton family is really willing to intervene, I'll let you all go immediately." At the Dragon's Crest estate, in front of the monitors, I sat with my legs crossed, calmly watching Sophia on the screen. When I heard her trying to use my name for protection, I couldn't help but laugh. "Master, it seems the Miller sisters do still have you in their hearts." The system's electronic voice sounded in my mind. It hadn't understood my plan before, but after seeing that scene, it finally got it. This was clearly a way to use external pressure to make the Miller sisters realize their true feelings. It had to admit this method was much more direct than quietly leaving or playing hard to get. People only learn to cherish what they've lost. Just then, my phone, which was on the table in front of me, rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. I had blocked Isabella's original number long ago, so she couldn't get through. Left with no choice, she must have borrowed Julian's phone to call me. I was waiting for the good part of the show, so of course I wasn't going to answer. Instead, I watched the monitor with great interest. On the screen, as the phone rang unanswered, Sophia's expression grew more and more desperate, while Isabella and Julian's faces filled with despair. At this point, I was their only hope. If they couldn't reach me, they were truly finished. "Answer the phone! Answer the phone!" Sophia hung up and dialed again, frantic with anxiety. "Master, are you really not going to answer?" the system asked curiously. "It looks like the Miller sisters have realized their mistake." I sighed, setting my wine glass on the table. "I have to say, you truly are a system from a trashy romance novel. Your brain isn't normal either." I looked at the monitor and shook my head in disdain. They haven't realized they were wrong. They've only realized they're about to die. And besides, so what if they know they were wrong? Does that mean I have to forgive them? The system's voice paused for a moment, then said with some hesitation, "Master, I must advise you, your way of thinking is quite evil." I shrugged indifferently. I've never considered myself a righteous person. Only children and fools believe in such things. Sophia stubbornly called a dozen more times, but each call went straight to a busy signal. Finally, she fell into complete despair. How is this possible? How could Ethan not answer my calls? Is he still angry? Can't he tell that I'm calling so frantically because something is wrong? At a time like this, how can he still be hung up on such a trivial matter? Sophia was furious. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. In this desperate moment, I had become her only lifeline. She felt that even if I was angry, I shouldn't be ignoring her calls. How could this man be so petty? She had told him countless times that there was nothing going on between her, her sister, and Julian. Why wouldn't he believe them? Sir, maybe I can try calling from your phone? I promise Ethan will answer this time, Sophia pleaded, looking at Rex. In response, Rex slapped her hard across the face. So you're the Walton family's fiancée, huh? Sophia was stunned by the blow and fell to the ground. Rex stepped forward again and delivered another backhand slap. I was wondering why I'd never heard about the Walton heir getting engaged. Turns out you were just bluffing. Sophia's mouth was now filled with blood. Rex stood up and flexed his wrist. All right, the farce is over. I'm tired of watching you act. You, the idiot over there, have you made your choice? If you still can't decide, then all three of you can stay. On the other side, Julian was hauled to his feet by Rex's men, their vicious eyes glaring at him from behind their masks. It was time to make a decision. Julian trembled from head to toe, his gaze shifting between Sophia and Isabella. What should he do? Who should he choose? Rex began to count down from 3. For a moment, it felt as if the very air had frozen. Sophia, still on the ground, tried to get up, but she was shaking too much from fear. This was a true life-or-death moment. Whoever was left behind would face an unimaginable fate. To become a plaything for a group of vile men, to be sold, to be violated, it was a hell worse than death. Isabella was just as terrified, desperately hoping Julian would choose her. Julian, choose me. Sophia suddenly screamed. I'm the eldest daughter, the primary heir of the Miller family, and I like you more than my sister does, Julian. Hearing this, Isabella's world collapsed. Her eyes, which had been squeezed shut, flew open, and she stared at her sister in disbelief. I choose Sophia. In the final moment, Julian made his decision. Sophia was immediately released, and supporting each other, she and Julian shakily left the basement. Isabella was left tied to the chair, her eyes dull and lifeless. The basement door slowly closed. Her sister was saved. Her dear little brother Julian was saved, but the price was that she was left behind in hell forever. In the Dragon's Crest estate, the large monitor froze on Isabella's expression. Her face was shrouded in darkness, but her eyes grew increasingly shadowed with a brewing storm. This was human nature. A person can accept their own sacrifices, but they can never accept betrayal from their closest loved ones. To save her own life, Sophia had personally pushed her own sister into the abyss. A seed of hatred was planted in Isabella's heart. A faint smile played on my lips. This excellent drama brought me pleasure. In that moment, even the system felt a chill run down its spine. There was no love or affection in my eyes. To the system, I was a demon who reveled in manipulating human hearts. Meanwhile, at the Miller residence, David Miller was like an ant on a hot pan. Not long ago, his butler had called to report that he couldn't find any trace of the sisters on the island. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The thought that his 2 daughters had eloped with Julian instantly crossed his mind. Right now, his daughters were his only hope for a comeback. If they didn't return, how could he possibly explain things to the Walton family? Just then, his phone rang. It was the butler. David Miller answered eagerly, but the news he received was hard to believe. His 2 daughters had been kidnapped. And not only that, the kidnappers had viciously taken his younger daughter, Isabella, while Sophia had only been saved because Julian had risked his life. David Miller was stunned. He never thought his daughters would encounter something like this. His eldest had narrowly escaped, but his youngest's fate was unknown. Fortunately, Sophia and Julian were now in a hospital under the butler's care. After an examination, Sophia was found to have only minor injuries. Julian, however, had a broken leg, and the injury was so severe that he would likely spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. David Miller didn't care about Julian. As long as Sophia was safe, that was all that mattered. Swallowing his shock and rage, he ordered, "You stay there and watch over her. I want the eldest miss back here by the day after tomorrow at the latest. As for Isabella, investigate. I want to know who dared to kidnap a member of the Miller family." One disaster after another had struck in the past few days. His company was on the verge of bankruptcy, his younger daughter was missing, and he had been utterly humiliated at the Walton estate. It was enough to make anyone explode with anger. When he thought about it, wasn't it all because of his 2 brainless daughters? If they hadn't insisted on taking that freeloader Julian on vacation, none of this would have happened. He hated Julian with a passion, but it was too late for that now. He had to cut his losses. At that moment, in a hospital room on the resort island, while the butler was outside talking to David Miller, Sophia was staring intently at Julian. "Julian, I know this is hard for both of us to accept, but you must not tell anyone what really happened," she said. She had just fabricated a story about the kidnapping. In her story, there was no choose one condition. There were only vicious kidnappers who wanted to sell both sisters, but Julian arrived just in time to stop them. In the end, Julian fought desperately to save Sophia, but his leg was broken in the process, and Isabella was unfortunately taken away, her fate unknown. She had no choice but to say this. If the truth came out, not only would Julian be held responsible, but she wouldn't fare any better. Pushing her own sister into the abyss to save herself was enough to make her a social pariah and could even jeopardize her inheritance. She loved her sister, but only when her sister wasn't a threat. Without a doubt, after what had happened, Isabella had become a stumbling block for Sophia. "I understand, Sophia," Julian said, his right leg in a cast, his expression downcast. "I just don't know how Isabella is doing." Sophia's expression was unreadable, a mix of fear, pain, and, above all, resolve. To be honest, she was now hoping that Isabella would die at the hands of those kidnappers and never return. "Don't think about that. If she really does come back, things won't end well for you either," Sophia said in a low voice. Julian understood. This wasn't a topic for discussion. He had only brought it up to test Sophia's attitude. After all, they were sisters. If they reconciled and turned their anger on him, he would be in deep trouble. Now that he was sure Sophia was on his side, there was no need to bring it up again. "I know, Sophia. In my current state, I really only have you. You won't abandon me, will you?" Julian asked. Sophia looked at his cast-covered leg, a flash of pity in her eyes. "Don't worry. As long as I'm here, no one will bully you. After all, you saved my life." Speaking of which, her thoughts turned to me. She had called me so many times, but I hadn't answered a single one. If I had, how would those kidnappers have dared to break Julian's leg? How could her sister have been taken away? This time, Ethan had truly gone too far. The thought of me made Sophia clench her fists. Once she recovered and returned, she was determined to confront me. This time, she would make me apologize to Julian. Still not satisfied, she thought viciously to herself, "No, he has to kneel and apologize. Otherwise, I will never forgive him in this lifetime." Far away in New York, I had no idea that I had already earned her bitter resentment. The show was over. I turned off the monitor and contacted Rex. "Torment Isabella a little, then bring her back tomorrow. Control the intensity. Don't kill her. She'll be useful later. I'm very interested in seeing the Miller sisters tear each other apart." "Yes, sir," Rex replied with a cruel and wicked smile. With that matter temporarily concluded, I changed into a suit and prepared to head to the office. Just as I was about to leave, I received a call from a familiar number. "Sir, I've arrived at the airport. Would it be too much trouble for you to come pick me up?" A young woman's voice asked cautiously on the other end. I paused, a little surprised. "Chloe, you're at the airport in New York? Are your eyes better?" The young woman's voice on the other end was filled with joy. "Thanks to you, sir. The specialist you hired was amazing. I can see now." At the same time, a stream of information suddenly popped up from the system in my mind. "Master, the system has detected a tragic romance heroine. Name, Chloe Hayes. Identity, daughter of Los Angeles tycoon Robert Hayes. History, 18 years ago, Robert Hayes and his first wife had a daughter. However, on the day of her birth, the wife's jealous and resentful best friend swapped her own daughter with Chloe. This twisted woman then proceeded to abuse and torment Chloe throughout her childhood, leaving her emaciated and blind. She nearly died in the winter 3 years ago before being rescued by the host. I had to admit, the system's scanning function was quite useful. I vaguely remembered it. 3 years ago, one winter, I had come across a stunningly beautiful girl, a pitiful soul cruelly abandoned by her parents. Taking a breath, I called to my driver, "We'll go to the office later. Head to the airport first to pick up Miss Chloe." With Rex out of the country, the burly man codenamed Tiger was driving for me. "Has Miss Chloe's eyesight been cured?" Tiger asked, pleasantly surprised. Although I had always treated Chloe like a younger sister, she had no airs about her. She was kind to every servant in the Walton household, got along with everyone, and was well loved. "Yes, I bet the moment she could see, she couldn't wait to come back," I said. "She must have missed you, sir," Tiger chuckled, starting the car and heading towards the airport. Inside the airport, a young woman in a white blouse and a blue pleated skirt sat in the waiting area. The moment she saw me, her eyes seemed to light up. Though she had never been able to see my face before, she recognized me instantly. It was a strange and wonderful feeling, a recognition born of scent, sound, touch, and a woman's intuition. Even when she was blind, she could always sense my presence the moment I drew near. Chloe ran towards me excitedly and threw her arms around my waist in a tight hug. I was taken aback for a second. The little girl had grown up. After all, at 18, she was a young woman, and her body had fully matured. After a moment, Chloe let go, lowering her head shyly. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just a little too excited." I smiled and gently tapped her nose. "You're a bold one, aren't you? Your eyes just healed, and you've already run all the way back here without staying for observation." Chloe lifted her head slightly. "I know my own body. Besides, I couldn't wait to see what you really look like." Beside us, Tiger clutched his chest in mock pain. "It seems Miss Chloe only has eyes for you, sir." And here I thought I was her martial arts master. When Chloe first came to the Walton household, she was determined to prove her worth and learned many things, including martial arts. Surprisingly, despite being blind, she turned out to be a prodigy. Her senses were far sharper than an ordinary person's, and she could detect an opponent's attack just by listening. I took Chloe's hand, ready to head back to the estate, when a commotion in the airport caught my attention. I glanced over and saw a chase unfolding amidst the bustling crowd. A dozen men in black suits and sunglasses were pursuing a young man with a buzz cut. The young man's face was bruised, and he ran with an unsteady gait, stumbling several times as if about to fall. It was clear he was weak, his face pale and sickly. Unsurprisingly, with his poor physical condition, he stood no chance against a dozen strong men. Before long, the young man stumbled and fell, and two of the men in black immediately pinned him to the ground. "You were about to graduate and you decided to run? Are you trying to delay your graduation?" one of the men whispered in his ear. Hearing the words, "delay your graduation," the young man began to tremble uncontrollably, as if reliving a nightmare. "No, please no. I really don't want to go back to that place. Please let me go," the young man begged. But the man in black was unmoved. "What are you talking about? Miss Hayes sent you there for refinement. Now that you've graduated, of course you have to return to the Hayes family, right?" With that, he mercilessly hauled the young man to his feet. Facing the stares of the crowd and questions from airport security, the man in black quickly produced an ID card. "Don't worry, everyone. We're from the Mount Cloud Sanitarium. This is one of our patients who tried to run away. We had to apprehend him quickly to prevent any potential public disturbance. We apologize for the inconvenience." The man's explanation was flawless, and with the ID to back it up, he quickly gained the trust of the airport security, who allowed them to take the young man away, completely oblivious to the terror in his eyes. The commotion ended. From a distance, I leaned against the railing, watching with curiosity. My eyes narrowed slightly. The Mount Cloud Sanitarium? The name was just a front. The institution's real name was the Sterling Institute, located in a desolate mountainous area outside the city. Within our circles, it had a more colloquial name, the Gentlemen's Academy. It appeared to be a place for cultivating elites, but in reality, it was a place where powerful matriarchs sent unwanted illegitimate sons, disobedient children, or indiscreet lovers to be disciplined. As absurd as it sounded, its existence proved there was a demand for such a service. At that moment, the system's notification chimed in my head again. "Master, you're in luck. You've encountered another tragic romance protagonist. Information as follows: name, Leo Sterling, gender, male, identity. The destined love interest for Serafina Hayes, heiress of the Los Angeles Hayes family. History, fell in love at first sight with Serafina Hayes. Due to their vast difference in social status, and instigated by Serafina's male best friend, who claimed Leo was only after the Hayes family fortune, Serafina grew wary of him. A year ago, feeling that Leo was too undisciplined, Serafina, on her friend's advice, personally sent Leo to the Gentlemen's Academy, where he endured a full year of torment. Reading this, I raised an eyebrow. I never expected to run into another tragic romance protagonist here. And from the looks of it, this one had been through quite an ordeal. The Gentlemen's Academy was an academy in name only. In reality, it was a filthy hell. The students there weren't even treated as human beings, but as livestock. A whole year, who knows what kind of suffering that guy endured. Of course, I wasn't interested in him. What caught my attention was the woman in the story, Serafina. She was the daughter of the Los Angeles tycoon Robert Hayes, the child of him and his mistress, and the very person who had switched lives with Chloe. When I first learned about Chloe's situation, I had planned to help her resolve it, but she stopped me. It wasn't out of kindness. Chloe hated the Hayes family, especially that despicable couple, with a burning passion. She wanted to rely on her own strength to get her revenge. I paused for a moment, then smiled. Now this was interesting. The woman by my side didn't need to be a delicate flower in a greenhouse, nor should she be a bitter woman consumed by hatred. She could be a rose with thorns, a phoenix rising from the ashes. "All right," I said, raising my hand to gently trace her soft cheek. I will give you the stage for your revenge and hand you the sharpest blade. But remember, the hand that wields it must be your own. I never doubted Chloe's determination, just as I never doubted my own power. Her idea of relying on herself and my understanding of it might differ slightly. But for me, providing her with the resources to crush everything and letting her be the one to press the button was the greatest respect I could show her. Thank you, sir. Chloe's eyes reddened slightly, but she stubbornly held back her tears. She stood on her tiptoes and placed a light, fleeting kiss on my cheek, leaving behind the sweet fragrance of a young woman and a hint of coolness. I took her hand and left the airport with her and Tiger. As for the young man who was taken away, Leo Sterling, I had already given Tiger a subtle signal. For the Walton family, getting someone out of a so-called sanitarium was easier than picking up a stray cat off the street. Half an hour later, in the private medical wing of the Dragon's Crest estate, Leo Sterling sat trembling on a pristine white bed. He was in clean clothes with an .4 in his arm. A top-tier private doctor was tending to his wounds, but the fear in his eyes hadn't subsided in the slightest. He scanned his surroundings warily, like a cornered, terrified animal. I didn't go in, merely watching him quietly from behind a one-way mirror. Sir, I've looked into it, Tiger said, handing me a file. It matches the system's intelligence. Serafina Hayes and her male best friend orchestrated the whole thing, sending him to that gentleman's academy. He was there for a full year, suffering all kinds of torture and humiliation. He escaped during a supervised outing. I flipped through the file, which detailed everything Leo had endured at the academy. The words were cold and brutal, enough to break any normal person's spirit. The Hayes family, I murmured, a glint of coldness in my eyes. They had not only hurt my Chloe, but they had also dragged another innocent person down into hell. Sir, what are your orders? Wait until he's more stable, then bring him to me, I said, tossing the file aside and walking towards the living room. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, waiting anxiously. She stood up the moment she saw me. Sir, that man, just a poor soul, I said, sitting down beside her and pulling her into my arms. Don't worry. Soon you'll need a pawn to lead the charge, and he is the perfect candidate. An hour later, Leo Sterling was brought to my study. He was still tense, but at least he was no longer terrified. He had probably figured out that anyone who could so easily rescue him from those men wouldn't need to go to such lengths if they meant him harm. I sat behind the massive mahogany desk, my fingers interlaced, and watched him with a calm gaze. Leo Sterling, I began, getting straight to the point. Do you want revenge? He snapped his head up, his eyes blazing with astonishing hatred, but it quickly faded, replaced by endless despair and self-mockery. Revenge? With what? I can't even escape that hell on my own. You can't because you have no power, I said coolly. But I can give you power. I pushed a new file across the desk to him. It contained detailed information on Serafina Hayes and her friend, the internal conflicts within the Hayes family, the weak points in their businesses, and even evidence of the friend secretly embezzling Hayes family assets. Leo trembled as he read, not from fear, but from excitement. The information in this file was enough to send his two enemies to a point of no return. Why are you helping me? He asked, his voice hoarse. Because your enemies have also provoked me, I said, standing up and walking over to him, looking down at him. More accurately, they hurt someone very important to me. Serafina Hayes stole a life that belonged to another girl. That girl's name is Chloe Hayes. I briefly told him the story of the switched heiresses. Leo's face was a mask of shock and disbelief, which eventually melted into a bitter, sorrowful laugh. He understood now. Everything he had gone through was just collateral damage in a much larger conspiracy. I'm giving you two choices, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. First, take a sum of money I'll provide, change your identity and disappear. Never show your face in New York or Los Angeles again. Second, become my weapon. I will give you the best team and the most substantial capital to go to Los Angeles and turn the Hayes family upside down. When it's done, Serafina and her friend are yours to deal with as you see fit. Leo didn't hesitate for a second. He dropped to his knees, his forehead hitting the floor with a dull thud that echoed in the spacious study. I choose the second path. I will do anything for you. I only ask for the chance to take my revenge with my own hands. I nodded in satisfaction. Hatred was the most effective fuel. Very good, I said, signaling for Tiger to help him up. From this day on, you are no longer that down-and-out college student. Rex's overseas team will give you a week of intensive training to teach you how to be a man of power. A week from now, you will descend upon Los Angeles, backed by a $10 billion investment from Walton Enterprises. I looked at his face, flushed with excitement, and added, "Remember, you are an Avenger, not a simp. Don't harbor any more illusions about Serafina Hayes. Otherwise, I will personally throw you back into that academy and let you delay your graduation indefinitely." Leo shuddered, the last trace of hesitation in his eyes vanishing, replaced by a bone-deep coldness and resolve. The pawn was in position. For the next few days, I accompanied Chloe as she familiarized herself with the estate. She was like a happy butterfly, full of curiosity about the world she had lived in for 3 years but had never truly seen. And I, in turn, savored this rare moment of peace. But this tranquility was destined to be short-lived. That afternoon, as Chloe and I were having tea in the garden, the butler approached with a strange expression to make an announcement. "Sir, the eldest Miss Miller, Sophia, and a Mr. Vance are at the gate, requesting to see you." I raised an eyebrow. "So they've arrived. About time they got back from their trip." "Let them in," I ordered coolly. Chloe looked at me with some concern. "Sir, is it the Miller sisters?" "Just an idiot and a cripple," I said, patting her hand reassuringly. "Just watch the show." Soon, 2 figures appeared at the entrance to the garden. Sophia was dressed in designer clothes, her makeup flawless, but her face was a mask of suppressed rage and arrogance. Beside her was a man in a wheelchair, none other than Julian Vance. His right leg was in a thick cast, and his face was pale, wearing an expression of profound victimhood. The moment they appeared, the relaxed atmosphere in the garden froze. Sophia's gaze first landed on me, then swept over Chloe like a knife, a flash of jealousy and disdain in her eyes. "Ethan, we're back," she said, her tone icy, as if she had come to condemn, not to plead. I picked up my teacup, took a light sip, and didn't even bother to look up. "Oh, is the trip over? Did you have fun?" My dismissive attitude completely enraged Sophia. She took a step forward, pointed at Julian in his wheelchair, and shrieked, "Fun? Look at what's become of Julian. His leg is broken, and my sister, Isabella, is missing. We don't even know if she's alive or dead. This is all because of you." I finally looked up, watching her with amusement. "Because of me? Do tell. If you hadn't been so petty, canceling our cards and ignoring our calls over a single birthday, would we have ended up in that situation? Would Julian's leg be broken? Would Isabella have been taken by kidnappers?" Sophia grew more agitated as she spoke, as if she held the moral high ground. "Ethan, I didn't come here today to beg you. I came to demand an explanation for Julian." From his wheelchair, Julian put on a pained and wronged expression, adding in his cloying voice, "Ethan, I know you have a misunderstanding about me, but Sophia and Isabella are innocent. If you have a problem, just take it out on me. It's my fault for being useless and unable to protect them." I almost laughed out loud. This despicable pair really saw themselves as the protagonists of a tragedy. "So, what kind of explanation do you want?" I asked, setting down my teacup and looking at them leisurely. Sophia took a deep breath and said something that even managed to shock me. "I want you to get on your knees and apologize to Julian." At her words, even the nearby servants looked on in disbelief. Chloe's face flushed with anger, and she was about to speak, but I stopped her with a look. I stared at the clueless woman before me and slowly stood up. "Sophia, it seems the foreign air didn't clear your head. It just made you even more stupid," I said, then clapped my hands. The massive screen at the back of the garden, which I usually used for watching sports, lit up. But what appeared on it was not a soccer field. The video began to play. A dark basement, the Miller sisters tied to chairs, and a blindfolded Julian. When Rex's distorted voice echoed, "1 million can only save one," Sophia's face instantly turned deathly pale. The video continued. Julian's agonizing choice, Isabella's desperate cries, and Sophia's heart-wrenching scream, "Julian, choose me. I'm the eldest daughter. I like you more than my sister does." Finally, the footage showed Julian tremblingly uttering the words, "I choose Sophia." The video wasn't long, but every frame was like a resounding slap across Sophia's and Julian's faces. The garden fell into a dead silence. Sophia trembled all over, her lips quivering, unable to utter a single word. Her proud victim persona had been utterly shattered by the absolute truth. Julian's face was ashen. He looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "Now," my voice, cold as a blade, echoed through the garden. "Do you still want me to kneel and apologize?" Sophia collapsed to her knees with a thud, not out of remorse, but out of terror. She finally realized that the man standing before her was no longer the tolerant Ethan, who had always indulged them. "No, that's not it. Ethan, let me explain." "Explain," I sneered. Explain how you pushed your own sister into the abyss to save yourself? Or explain how you two despicable people concocted a lie to try and blame me? I walked up to her and looked down at her bloodless face. I gave you a chance and you threw it away. From the moment you trampled on the Walton family's dignity for a man, your family was already dead in my eyes. I waved my hand to the guards. Get these two eyesores out of my sight. From now on, no one from the Miller family, not even their dogs, is to set foot in the Dragon's Crest estate. The guards immediately moved in, dragging away the limp Sophia and the terrified Julian like dead weight. Their cries and pleas were nothing but noise to me. After taking out the trash, I returned to Chloe's side. She was looking at me with a mixture of adoration and a hint of pity. Sir, it's nothing, I said, sitting back down and pouring her a glass of juice. The game has only just begun. That night, Rex brought Isabella back. She was a wreck, physically and mentally on the verge of collapse, but in her hollow eyes, two flames of hatred burned brightly. I didn't say much, just had someone play the video from that afternoon on a loop for her. Once, twice, 3 times. Isabella went from initial numbness to disbelief, and finally to hysteria. She screamed madly, cursing Sophia's and Julian's names, her nails digging so deep into her palms that they bled. When she finally collapsed from exhaustion, a heap on the floor, I walked over. Do you want revenge? I asked, the same question I had posed to Leo Sterling. She looked up, her bloodshot eyes fixed on me, her voice as hoarse as sandpaper. Yes, I want them dead. I want them to die a horrible death. Good, I said, tossing a file in front of her. All of the Miller family's dirty secrets, business vulnerabilities, and every illegal thing your father has done over the years are in here. From now on, you will be the one to sink this ship. Ask for whatever you need. Isabella snatched the file as if it were both a lifeline and a scythe of vengeance. She laughed, a wild and chilling sound. A storm, brewing from within, was about to break over the Miller family. Isabella, the younger daughter everyone thought was dead, reappeared like a phantom and turned the Miller family upside down. She leaked Sophia's scandal to the media, reported her father's tax evasion to the IRS, and revealed the company's core secrets to their competitors. The Miller family, already teetering on the brink from my pressure, collapsed instantly under this fatal internal blow. Their stock plummeted, assets were frozen, and partners turned against them. Upon receiving the bankruptcy notice, David Miller had a stroke and was left paralyzed. The Miller family, the upstarts who had once thrived under the Walton's shadow, were completely wiped from New York City in less than a week. And through it all, I simply watched from the sidelines. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Leo Sterling, the god of vengeance, I had armed with money and hatred, had already unleashed a tidal wave. His newly formed Apocalypse Capital was ruthlessly and precisely targeting the Hayes family's businesses. Using the intelligence I provided, he turned senior executives within the Hayes company, exposed the schemes of Serafina's friend, and publicized Serafina's extravagant and chaotic personal life. The Hayes family was in turmoil, besieged from within and without. The time was ripe. I took Chloe and, on my private jet, descended upon Los Angeles. We didn't bother with a private meeting. We walked directly into the Hayes Corporation's board meeting. When Chloe and I appeared at the boardroom door, everyone froze. Robert Hayes, the man who was nominally Chloe's biological father, turned deathly pale. Serafina shrieked as if she'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here? I ignored these clowns, simply taking Chloe's hand and walking step by step to the head of the conference table. Gentlemen, my voice was not loud, but it carried clearly to every person in the room. I am here today for one reason only, to return what was stolen. I slapped a DNA report and a legal notice onto the table. The baby swapping incident from 18 years ago. I believe some of you in this room know more about it than I do. Chloe Hayes is the sole legal, first-in-line heir to the Hayes family. The evidence was irrefutable. Robert Hayes's face was ashen, and Serafina's mother collapsed to the floor. I gave them no time to react. My legal team stepped forward immediately, announcing that they would be filing charges of kidnapping, abuse, and corporate embezzlement against Serafina, her mother, and all other involved parties. At the same time, I announced that Walton Enterprises would be strategically investing in and restructuring the Hayes Corporation, and all shares of the new entity would be transferred to Chloe Hayes's name. This, I said, looking at Chloe, who was watching everything in a daze, tears glistening in her eyes, will be part of the dowry I, Ethan Walton, present to my fiancée. The entire room was in shock. It was a complete and utter rout. From the physical to the psychological, from business to law, I had laid an inescapable trap and caught all my enemies in one fell swoop. The final outcome was just as I had planned. The Hayes family was completely absorbed by my corporation. Serafina and her mother were imprisoned, destined to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Her friend's fate was even worse. After Leo found him, he had his tendons cut and was thrown into an underground fighting ring abroad. With his revenge complete, I gave Leo a large sum of money and a new identity. He chose to disappear and live a normal life. As for the Miller family, David Miller was paralyzed, surviving on welfare. After the bankruptcy, Sophia was hunted by loan sharks. To save herself, she pushed the crippled Julian in their path and fell into a life of prostitution, eventually dying of disease in some forgotten corner. As for Isabella, after witnessing the miserable end of her enemies, the tightly wound string in her mind finally snapped. She had a complete mental breakdown and was sent to a real psychiatric hospital, forever trapped in a nightmare of betrayal and revenge. Their so-called dramatic chase to win me back never even had a chance to be staged before it turned to ash. And I, in turn, had arrived at the most important day of my life, the wedding of the century. It was held on a private island I owned, with turquoise waters, blue skies, and sand as white as snow. The world's top celebrities, political figures, and business tycoons gathered to witness the grand ceremony. Chloe, in her white wedding gown, was as beautiful as an angel descended to earth. She took my arm and step by step, we walked towards the altar. The system's voice sounded in my mind. By now, it had been reduced to my personal data analyzer. Host's happiness index has reached its peak. The fate of the tragic romance world has been completely reversed. Congratulations, master. Happy wedding. Paid it no mind. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, I placed the unique diamond ring on Chloe's finger. I gazed into her eyes, which were filled with happy tears, leaned in, and whispered a promise only she could hear. From this day forward, no one will ever dare to cause you the slightest grievance. With tears in her eyes, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed my lips. The sunlight bathed us in its warm, brilliant glow. In the distance lay the empire of business and power I had built for her, an empire of absolute loyalty. This world, in the end, had followed my script to its proper conclusion.